Welcome to Season 2 of the Making Bank podcast, where we continue our exploration of South Florida's entrepreneurial landscape with host Keith Costello, co-founder and CEO of Locality Bank. Sit back, relax, and let South Florida visionaries guide you on an entrepreneurial journey from tribulation to triumph, sharing the very stories that have shaped them.
Andrea, Tsakanikas, welcome to Locality Bank's Making Bank podcast.
Thank you. Very happy to be here today.
That's not an easy last name to say.
I know. I'm very impressed.
I nailed it.
I'm sitting here. You nailed it. You've had a lot of years of practice, though, too.
Okay, you called me out. So actually, Andrea and my wife have been friends for
30-some years when we were
even though
babies.
they both look like they're teenagers.
Right. We were both like 5 when we met.
Wow.
Right.
But yeah, you guys go back a long time, I know, and so I have had practice with that name. So anyway, really happy that you could join us today. It's great to have a successful female entrepreneur, because a lot of times we end up with guys sitting here, so we're really, really excited to have you share some of your secrets, because we know we have a lot of female listeners who are out there saying, how can I start a business? How can I be successful? How can I make my dreams happen? So let's start with your family life and how you grew up, and the family dynamics, I think, have a lot to do with how people evolve. So tell us about that.
Excellent. It's true. I think that the older we get, the more we want to really learn and understand about where we came from and our genes. My history really starts with both my great-grandmother on my father's side and my grandmother on my mother's side were entrepreneurs. And during those days, that was absolutely not the norm. And so I've really spent a lot of time studying it. When I was a kid, I felt that I was not really normal. I didn't have a normal home life because all the women were out working. They were not teaching me how to cook and do all the domestic things that most of my friends were learning. And I always felt like I was like more of an outcast because I didn't have that same home life that the other kids did. And that's why actually when I was 8, I moved in with my dad and my stepmother because she was a homemaker and she gave me a lot of that side that I'd never learned from, my mom and my grandmother and great-grandmother. But the history goes is that my great-grandmother and also my grandmother, their backgrounds really started very similar in property management, real estate, vacation rentals. The one side started a motel they bought a piece of land in the early 1950s in a town called Margate, which is right outside of Atlantic City, New Jersey, and built a motel, and they owned a lot of vacation rentals. And then on my mother's side, my grandmother, they started a secondhand department store in Liberty City of Miami. And I don't know how many of you are familiar with that area, but that was back in the 1940s when there was literally a wall around Liberty City. And my grandparents went and saw there was a need to bring, department store type things to those locals that lived there.
And it's primarily a Black community, right?
It was
Liberty
absolutely.
City,
And
for
so
those of you
here's
not familiar with it.
Right. And here's this Jewish couple that decided we need to bring a department store, and they started a secondhand department store in the 1940s. And my grandfather went and got his real estate license and didn't really do anything with it. But my grandmother said, whoa, I'm going to go out and get mine. And she got her broker's license in the early 1950s. And in the department store, she started a real estate brokerage, and they started helping the local community to get. Initially, they were going to rent properties, but they started helping them get FHA and different loans to be able to buy properties in Liberty City and Overtown. So my grandparents got into, from there, the building business. So a lot of the properties in Liberty City and Overtown, they developed and built a lot of the homes, a lot of the apartment buildings, and things like that. So their real estate company and property management, I started working there in the late 80s, early 90s. And I just had a taste from both sides for starting in management. and
Wow.
real estate and vacation rentals and just all different types of property and facility management.
And I think somewhere in there was a bank too, right?
There was a bank in the 1980s. My grandmother and my mother's dream was to start a bank as well. And they actually started one. It was called Ocean Mark Bank started out in North Miami. And my mom was one of only 3 female chairwomen at the time in the earlier 80s. So I definitely grew up not realizing that I had this amazing group of role models to learn, from as an entrepreneur, thinking at the time it was almost like a curse. But now as an adult, I realize they really gave me that entrepreneurial spirit.
That's
And
an
I'm
incredible
blessed.
story. I mean, because you think about, particularly real estate, banking, these are male dominated. I mean, even today, you look at those industries and there are very few female executives or success stories in those industries. And to think in the 50s that they had risen in the 60s to that level of prominence. So that is really, you had a real education there, and you had some sounds like great role models. So how did you get interested in the hotel? I mean, obviously there were family members involved in it, and then, so did you end up, you went to high school and all that, and then what? Did you go to college?
Yeah.
Did you, and what happened from there?
Right. So in high school, I went to high school here in Coral Springs, and then I actually started college. I went to 3 different colleges, which is amazing. I don't think many people do that, but both my mom and my dad met at University of Miami, so I was always a Cane my whole life. And my first year, I ended up going to be a Gator in Gainesville and said, I just can't do this because I grew up, everything was the U. So I ended up at University of Miami, loved it there, but ended up really wanting to kind of come home. And the college life wasn't so much for me I wanted to really be more local. So I ended up in my junior year going to Florida Atlantic University, and I went and got a job part-time it was a lease up for a Class A multifamily project. And back then they were just starting to build them. It was in West Boca. And I started out, my friend from high school, her mother was the property manager. So she gave me a job as a leasing agent and taught me the business, and I just fell in love with it. It was immediate, to the point that here was this college girl that was doing a lot of the job for the assistant manager and the manager, and I wanted to quit college and not finish. And my family said, no, you need to continue. So I worked about 32, 35 hours because I worked on the weekends and finished at FAU. And that's what launched my whole property management career.
Wow.
Because I love doing the lease up, where we were sitting in a trailer and we were pre-leasing all of the apartments prior to them being certified, for occupancy.
Wow.
So that was my taste and intro to it. And that's where I fell in love, not realizing that was what both grandmother, great grandmother, that's their background as well.
So that was your first job, really, and then
Yes.
Where did you go on from there?
So it evolved to, I worked for Trammell Crow. I worked for some of the larger national management companies. And I kept going back to, they kept trying to reel me in and say, we don't need you to work 6 days a week, or you're the manager and you need to come to the corporate office and spend more time here. But I just wanted to kind of build my own processes and procedures. And I was always like, just kind of not really conforming to that corporate world. And I think that's when I started realizing I really do want to be an entrepreneur and build my own path. So from there, I kind of moved around. Obviously, I went and worked for my grandmother, the real estate broker, and they were getting older, and I came in and helped them kind of automate and modernize their real estate property management brokerage until they passed away. And then from there, I went to the bank and helped in the bank. I was talking to Leo this morning about, I started there in the wholesale lending department. Because I was the daughter of the chairman of the bank, I had to prove myself by saying, I wasn't going to come in and work banker's hours. So I literally ended up doing sales calls. I got the West, I had Arizona and California, and I had to work from like 12 noon till 9 p.m. at night. And I made cold sales calls to mortgage brokers to try to get them to place their B and C loans with us in the bank. And that's where I started in the bank. I had to prove I think at that point we had about 160 some employees. I had to prove to them I wasn't like the chairman's daughter that didn't really want to put her time in. From there, I met my husband, and he was from Washington, D.C. He was a commercial mechanical contractor. And after dating back and forth and flying back and forth, I ended up moving to Washington, D.C. and just started working for him for a time. And that was managing his mechanical contracting company.
This is around what year?
This was in the later 90s.
Okay.
And then from there, I said, okay, it's time to go back to Florida. I couldn't stand the weather, even in the mid-Atlantic, because that's another piece of history for me. My grandmother's family, they migrated from Romania in the late 1870s to Key West before Miami was here. So I guess I really have roots in the warm weather. So I said to my husband, I really want to go and start this specialty property management company in Fort Lauderdale. And that was in 2002. I came back here. I went and found this small office space, and I launched a company it was a real estate brokerage, because I had gotten my real estate broker's license after working for my grandmother. And I launched a company doing vacation rentals, property management, and real estate sales. From there, we very quickly launched this business from scratch. And in the second year, NRT Caldwell Banker reached out, and they were very interested in looking to purchase us, because at the time, there wasn't like property management or vacation rental companies. They were big. They were doing heavy sales. And I guess we got the attention because they started seeing that our niche was selling a lot of large, homes, because the clients that were renting from us on a weekly or monthly basis, these beautiful vacation homes, they wanted to buy similar homes and put them in the pool so that they could use them in between getting income on renting them.
Wow.
So we spent about a year and a half in negotiations with NRT, because they wanted to use my company as a template in all of their, at the time, about 250 offices throughout Florida, as the property management, vacation rental divisions of each office. But what held me back there was I would have to stay on it was a 36-month period and work for NRT and Caldwell Banker. And I didn't really think I could conform and be happy. That's a long time. So I ended up selling to a smaller company, and then launched a consulting firm doing solely property management, real estate. Kenny was involved, my husband, on the construction management side. And so that's where we went more into the consulting arena. And that was in 2007, 2008.
Okay.
And we did that. And we still have that company. It's called KT Consulting International. We did that. We worked different areas. He did a lot of construction management, owner's rep, project management contracts, and I did a lot of property management. So we traveled a lot for many years. And then one day, one of the projects that I was working on, I was called to a small town in Texas, and that was 2012. And that is where I had an introduction to workforce mobile type workers and their housing, where I was working for a company. I was a consultant helping them build a property management division to manage all of their oil field projects that they had in West Texas and South Texas. So they were very remote oil and gas areas that a lot of investors were coming to Texas and developing housing for oil field workers. And so this was brand new. Here's this girl from Miami that they all made fun of. Here I was, driving down near the border.
Did you have cowboy boots?
I had to play the part. I had to have the cowboy boots, which actually I had already loved and been wearing since middle school. So I got to play the part, ponytail, cowboy boots, put your hair in a hat and go. So that was my introduction to the crew housing and the mobile workforce, because it was a world of property management I never, ever experienced before.
So you saw this other opportunity. So it sounds like throughout your life, actually, you've been very good at identifying opportunities and then creating businesses to basically take advantage of those, like in the vacation rentals and then now in Texas. So how did you go forward from there?
So here I was in Texas. And first of all, that was another really interesting piece. Most of my life, I had this draw to Texas. I mean, I was in love with the movie I think one of my questions today was, what was one of your favorite movies? Urban Cowboy. I mean, I had the old 8-track, the old tape, the 8-track. I knew every song. I watched that movie a million times. I had this draw to Texas. One of my friends from high school was from Texas. I used to wear the Longhorn shirt. I just loved Texas and never had been there. So I really, really enjoyed being in that state. And what happened was I continued on this consulting project. They asked me to stay on for a whole year. And during that year, of course, I missed being an entrepreneur again because I was working as their COO. But I saw an opportunity there was a need for a company to not manage the properties, but to manage it on the other side of the transaction, to manage the logistics and represent the companies that had the working crews. I was watching from my vantage point, we were billing these big oil and gas companies. They had long-term 1, 2, and 3-year leases in, hundreds of apartments, lots of hotel rooms, lots of, they call modular temporary housing. They call them man camps in the day. They're just not a permanent structure that's brought in and set up as a full service, almost like a hotel with a cafeteria. So we had lots of inventory and a lot of the beds and rooms were not occupied. So these companies had no insight into where are my crews, because they would move from rig to rig, or they would be on different shifts. They would come on site for 2 weeks and then go home. So there were crew changes and shift changes. And I started watching, they were just spending hundreds of thousands of dollars and not really tracking their people, their costs. And the light bulb went off and I said, there really needs to be a company that can manage the logistics for these organizations.
And that was Crew Facilities.
That is
and
Crew
so
Facilities.
You decide, here's an opportunity. So that took a lot of guts to just leave, because you had a good income from the consulting job. Mm-hmm. What was it that made you take that jump?
The need was really there, and the exciting piece is that KT Consulting, which I was doing a project, Kenny was also doing a project. We had a project for a local company, which you and I both know very well, Altman Development. They were building their first apartment complex in Austin, and it turned out to be literally right down the street, literally a mile from us. And Rob Gillette, who I've known for years, and he reached out to us and said, since you two are there, could Kenny possibly be our owner's rep and our eyes on this project that we're doing in Austin? So we basically knew we were going to be there at least a year or two. So the timing was perfect, and it gave me the opportunity to stay on and launch this organization.
Wow.
So we have some stories from home that helped me get started as well.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah.
So you decide, Kenny's got this nice gig with the Altman. You jump out, launch Crew Facilities, and did you need to raise any money? Did you have to go to a bank or any stories like that? So
that was the challenging piece, is that I had to decide at the time. I had a group that was interested in investing in the company, but I made a decision that I felt, because of a lot of my past experiences and wanting to really be outside of the box and really be a straight entrepreneur, I decided to go with starting it out, bootstrapping it with my own funds, which were very obviously not a whole lot. And so we started out, it was just myself. I started it out of our apartment that we were renting in Austin. And then I went from that to one employee who had worked for me in Texas, who came on board for a very low pay to eventually vest, to have some ownership in the company. So it was challenging because we were, started out very, very small. And I set goals that first year on, okay, we're going to go in and bring in these many rooms and these many contracts. And once we hit this goal, then we're going to go ahead and invest in the next step of infrastructure. And we started hiring virtual help from offshore. That's how we really started, other than the two of us. And each year we opened a bigger office in Austin. And then from there we came back here, and I opened my office here again, where I used to be back in the 2000s. So each year we would set goals, and depending on the way we quantify our successes, we look at number of rooms that are in-house. We call it heads in beds. So we look at the nightly room count. And so we would set goals on where we wanted to be. And then our next goal would be to kind of move up the next step and the next step.
Wow. So the importance of setting clear, specific goals. So when did you have that aha moment that like, this is going to be a success? Or when was your first big success in the business that you felt like, hey, this is a good idea?
Well, I'm always really hard on myself. So I think each year, even to now I'm in my 9th year, I still sit there and feel like sometimes I still consider myself like a mom and pop startup. And I know I've got over the years many mentors and leadership coaches, and they keep bringing me back and saying, have you seen your revenue? Have you seen where you are? You're in your 9th year and you're still calling yourself a mom and pop or startup. I think each year I set really extra high goals for myself. And I think I'm still always competing with myself by saying, I'm not there yet. I'm not there yet. So in going back, yes, each year we would have different contracts that most, I guess, would consider us to be successful. But the biggest one was during COVID and the pandemic. And we had thought we had diversified. So when I first started in 2015, we were in Texas, and most of my background there and my relationships there were in the oil and gas industry. So we initially started with one industry. Our clients hailed from oil and gas. And then as we went the first 2 or 3 years, I realized that's a dangerous place to be. You really need to diversify because the oil and gas market, as we all know, is very volatile. And so then we diversified into other industries on the commercial side. And then in 2017, because my husband was from DC and he had done solely government work, he had asked me, hey, you're women-owned, you're women-operated. Why are you not certified? And why are you not doing government contracting and housing for the government? So we went and got, in March of 2017, we started getting different certifications as women-owned small business, as disadvantaged business, a bunch of certifications. So we started a different division of our company, additional to the commercial, doing government contracting. And so we thought by 2018, 2019, okay, now we're diversified. We're doing a bunch of different commercial industries, but also different government agencies. We had been awarded quite a few Air National Guard, the different states contracts by then. We had been awarded, I believe, the Veterans Administration by then. So we were pretty diversified. But when COVID hit, just like for everybody else, we found that even our government contracts were grounded. And so we had no heads in beds. I mean, basically, I would say by March, it was March 16th, 17th, we had everything shut down, even for us.
Wow.
And so we got on the phones and we just started calling every agency that we had either been registered under as a potential vendor or maybe done work before. And we eventually were awarded a very large emergency management contract for the city of New York. And that was a $250 million award to do all the housing and logistics for not only all of their hospitals, but also their different agencies like the homeless, Child Protective Services, Department of Corrections, et cetera. So that was, I think, an aha moment that came very quickly, but also very quickly we realized we're a small women-owned business and we are used to doing last minute emergency mobilization where we don't need a lot of lead time. But this was a new world. I mean, this was where nobody knew where the needs were going to be or where this project was going. So in the first 5 or so days, we saw that we were really pushing the envelope of thousands of reservations coming in, and the scope of work changed quite a bit over a 5-day period where they needed us to capture and collect data for the mayor's office, the governor's office. They were using this data about the hospital workers and all of those. So I realized my software that we had developed, by the way, we have developed a software platform called Crewfax. It was, capable of running our business and could scale up, but nowhere near this magnitude of where we didn't know how many hospital workers were going to be calling in today or tomorrow. And so that was a big aha moment for us to see the world of partnering. So we actually started partnering with other companies at that time to be able to really execute and manage these types of projects so that we can scale up and scale down. So I think that was my big aha moment where I said, okay, now I've figured out a way to partner with other companies to really grow without building my company in a matter of days to, the number of employees it would require to scale up or down.
That's great advice to be able to partner or reach out when you need resources instead of trying to bring them all at the same time.
Right.
So you mentioned mentors. So who have been mentors for you?
So I realized, obviously, that, I have not spent a lot of time in the corporate world, obviously by choice, that I needed to bring in somebody to coach me and mentor me really early in the crew facilities, path and our direction of saying, okay, I am an entrepreneur and I know I'm starting a startup and it is like a mom and pop mentality. I need to bring a lot of that vision and expertise of how do I build my company to the levels of larger corporations. So in 2017, I brought on a leadership coach who had been at IBM for 30 some years, and her name is Darlene Templeton, and she's been with me for all of these years, solely initially to help coach me as a one-on-one, because I don't have, if you're a president or a CEO of a company, we all look for somebody to hold us accountable and call us out as well. Additionally, Vistage, which thank you very much for inviting me into your Vistage group, that has been a huge, huge help to me in growing the company and really just making sure that I'm going in the right direction and I am being held accountable and called out for things that's what I need, the coaching and to get my company to a level where it's headed.
Sure.
I think my biggest challenge in looking back at what would I have done differently with crew facilities, because I bootstrapped it and because I made the decision not to go out and secure funding to grow it a little faster, I grew the company with a bunch of different consultants that were literally sitting in as my leadership team. So HR consultant, I had a CFO consultant, I've had a contact center consultant, COO, I can name them all. I grew the company quickly because I invested in consultants, but I never hired those areas. I never filled those seats as full-time employees.
Okay.
So in a way, that's really kind of inhibited the growth. Because if you think about it, I'm one person and I'm now the only one really working in the day-to-day, where my consulting team, they're a great advisory board. They're helping guide me and teach me from their expertise and their vantage point, but they're not hands-on in the day-to-day.
So is that something that you're looking to do? Is that one of your goals now, is bring in the
yes.
leadership team, bring in those C-level executives?
Absolutely.
Okay.
But looking back, I wished I would have done that many years earlier. Because I think that has really been a big challenge for us. As far as, employee culture has been challenged because, a lot of the team has not had a day-to-day manager that they could reach out to support them and train them. And then one leader really helping to kind of be the buffer between me and operations and the different departments, because I'm busy, running in different and wearing a lot of different hats. Sometimes that slows down a leader to help really grow the company, because
Sure.
A lot of times, and we learned this in our last Vistage meeting, a lot of times entrepreneurs are moving so fast and we talk fast and we don't have time, and we've got these visions that others might think are a little crazy or out of the box. We don't realize that sometimes that affects our team because we're not spending the time to just allow them to vent or just be a sounding board. And we could possibly appear as we're a little uncaring.
That was a good lesson in the last Vistage meeting. And I think, it's interesting that you've picked up on that. And obviously that's something you're going to work on. But I think, it's an interesting trade-off. You certainly don't regret owning all of your business though either, right? So it turns out you bootstrapped it. You own 100% now, versus having gone another direction or having to pay debt off or, make a share with partners. So, it seems like now you'll be able to correct and head in that direction. So what advice do you have? Obviously, we talked about the fact that you come from a long line of of female entrepreneurs, your great-grandmother, your grandmother, and what advice do you have for particularly female entrepreneurs or would-be entrepreneurs who are out there listening to you, and what could you tell them about how to be successful?
I think it's really important to seek out other female CEOs and entrepreneurs. I think that's been a big part for me, where I'm part of a couple different council that are all women-owned companies, and where we're able to kind of share a lot of our challenges with each other. And you realize you're not alone in the world of being a female, in the world of being an entrepreneur. Just like in our Vistage group, I know we're searching for other females to join our group. You know, as you said, there's not a lot of women, as many out there that should be. And so I really think that it's important to not use their past experiences as, you know, a reason for not going out and trying to live their dream. I see that a lot, even in mentoring, the mentoring that I do. I hear every day about why they can't or what's holding them back, and they're afraid to take just one step to overcome it because the fear of failure is the piece that's all they're seeing, not the realization of, like, my dream could be right around the corner. And I think that's something that obviously I've been blessed with, because I think seeing the entrepreneurs in action my whole life, I don't have that same fear of risk that maybe sometimes I should. I want to be able to give back to other women, to give them the confidence that they've got to take that step or that risk.
Well, that's great. And to think you did that right from, you know, like you said, from your kitchen table, whatever, you know, it's not like you have to go out and, you know, quit your job. Right. You can start small and make it happen. So I also want to give a shout out to Noam, who's our basically our intern who's joined us. He's working with Ryan today, and he's with us from Junior Achievement. And
I'm on the board of Junior Achievement.
And I wanted to acknowledge that also.
Love that. So very passionate about the mission of Junior Achievement. We have an intern every year in our office as well. So we were talking about that this morning. I'm very impressed with Noam.
And I know Noam's parents are big fans of the Making Bank podcast, he told me. So, you know, we're giving a shout out to Noam for, you know, hoping his parents are watching this one. So
I'm sure they will be.
Okay. So any final advice before we go to the lightning round that you want to, or anything that we left out that we didn't ask you that you want to say?
I think that for any females that are really looking for any kind of support or mentorship, that's something I do, where I say I give back. I know during the pandemic, we had a virtual event for a lot of potential female entrepreneurs, and I put my contact info in the chat, saying, hey, if there's anyone that's looking for any kind of support or mentorship, please reach out. And I ended up with 9 women. This is during the pandemic. I had a lot of extra time because I wasn't traveling. So I've really enjoyed helping other women and really watching their paths. Out of the 9 women, I have 1. This is from back in about July of 2020 when I started this. I have 1 that has remained with me the entire time. Usually I have different programs where I'll have a different female come in and go through a mentorship. She stayed since that period, and I've watched her organization grow. So I really feel it's important for women to know, reach out, find somebody that has done it or that is an entrepreneur that you look up to, and reach out to them, because they will be very happy.
Well, do you want to give your contact info
I would
right
love
now?
To.
Yeah, go ahead.
For anybody that would love it to talk about mentorship opportunities, it's just Andrea at crewfacilities.com. And our website is also crewfacilities.com.
And you're also on LinkedIn. People can contact you on there as well. So
exactly.
Well, that's great. Well, and thank you for doing that, because, you know, that's the whole purpose of this podcast, is to really try to help entrepreneurs, give them some advice, show them that you can be successful, like the guests that are coming on our show. So now we go to the famous lightning round. So these are just quick answers.
Okay.
Your favorite book?
Favorite book, Law of Attraction.
Oh, wow. And we got it right out here.
Law of Attraction.
Interesting. Oh, that's great. Favorite song?
Oh, goodness.
And I know Kenny, your husband, was in a rock band.
I know. That's why I'm so into the 80s music, but I love Motown music and I love blues music. So probably, I mean, there's a bunch of different ones. The ones I really love are the ones that inspire me the most, that I hear like a message in there. So I can't really name just one.
Okay.
But a lot of heavy 80s music if you look at my YouTube that I'm playing.
All right, we'll go with an 80s playlist then.
There you go.
The best advice that you ever got?
I would say not allowing fear of failure to get in the way of taking that step to really live your dream, to just take that step.
Oh, that's great. So this has to be a quick one because sometimes I ask this question and people, so it's just got to be yes or no.
Good. Thank you for telling me.
So AI, do you fear it or do you embrace it?
Embrace.
Perfect.
Absolutely.
Okay. What are you most grateful for?
For a happy, healthy life and family. That's something you can't, that's something like no matter what we do, that's something that you can't.
That's beautiful.
Okay.
And how about travel? I know you just came back from a trip. Where do you still have on your list that you want to go?
So I have never been to Europe, and this was my first trip that we just took a few weeks ago. And I obviously been a serial entrepreneur, but a serial workaholic. So over the last few years, and probably more than that, I've canceled more trips than I've taken because work always comes first, and there's always a new project that's come on board, et cetera, et cetera. So this year, part of my SOAR goals for our Vistage group was I would not cancel my trips. So I actually had 2 trips this year planned. The next one is to Greece. But a lot of it for me is to learn the history of my family. Like we just visited where my husband's family was from in Denmark. And then I want to go to Romania and different areas to really like study the history and learn about where we came from.
Awesome. That's great. Do you have a favorite restaurant, local restaurant?
Favorite, probably because I love Italian. I think that's one of my really bad pig out food moments is probably Casa d'Angelo. I love it there.
That's
I love
great.
it there.
And how about, what do you do outside of work? You're a workaholic, but you've got to have some other hobbies, activities.
So the story goes, none of the women ever had hobbies in my family. So over the years, each year when I set my goals is to figure out, okay, I am going to spend a percentage of my time. I'm going to figure out what like lights me up as far as a hobby, and I'm going to start doing it. So over the years, I've narrowed it down to, I've had hobbies as far as let's go on the boat, let's fish. And that to me isn't like a consistent hobby because you really need a group to be able to do that. So I've narrowed down to a lot of meditation, finding just a way to quiet the mind. I feel like that's a hobby for me because that takes time, work, and effort, and it feels so good. It feels like you did something and you went out there and changed the whole dynamic of your mood or how you're feeling. So meditation, yoga, and not very athletic, didn't grow up doing well in sports or any of that. So getting out and doing things like biking or walking, or because we didn't really have a lot of that. We played tennis when we were kids, things like that. So just being a little more physical because that's not where I came from. And I know how good that makes me feel as far as calming the mind and reducing stress.
Great. How about who, living or dead, would you like to have dinner with?
Let's see. When I was a kid, I used to say Eleanor Roosevelt. She was always a person I would say would be my role model. But at this point, I think because I've spent so much time reading about how you can calm your mind and how you can kind of change your circumstances by focusing not only on your current circumstances, but your goal and where you want to be. I would say from reading and really understanding that, I've read a lot about Neville Goddard, and he's one of my favorite writers. He would be somebody I would really love to sit down with because I listened to him and his different speaking engagements that date back to like the 30s and 40s. I listened to a lot of his speeches on YouTube, and I keep picturing what it would be like to have actually been there listening to him.
Interesting. I'm not even familiar with
the Great Depression. He spoke a lot from the Great Depression area.
And the last question, what's your best moment and your worst moment in business?
So obviously my best moment was when I thought we were going to possibly have to shut down the company at the beginning of the pandemic, or at least lay off a lot of people, and where we didn't have to do that, and how fast that turned around. And probably my worst moment was really when I finally woke up to the fact that I didn't have a leadership team, and it was really just me. And I had spent a lot of years trying to build up a happy culture in my company and realizing that that was really the fail that should have been kind of regroup. I should have regrouped on that years back. So I probably wasted a lot of years on that and working a little too hard to overcome something that the answer was really right in front of me. I just didn't see it at the time.
Well, that's great. This has been great, Andrea. We appreciate you stopping by, and thanks. Great job today.
Thank you so much. I enjoyed it. Enjoyed it very much. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to Locality's Making Bank podcast. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform to catch the latest episodes, and visit localitybank.com today to learn more about all the benefits of banking local.